Welcome, travelers. This is the Baseball Time Machine. Our next journey takes us to the late 1960s, a time of iconic cartoons, the moon landing, the Beatles, and the emergence of a young ball player named Tom Seaver. Tom Terrific made his MLB debut in 1967 with the New York Mets, and quickly became synonymous with the ball club, emerging as one of the game's greatest arms. But how did he do it? Why did he ever leave New York? How did he one day record the highest approval rating in the history of the Baseball Hall of Fame? Let's step into the portal and find out. Tom's story begins in 1963, where he began his collegiate career at Fresno City College. He spent 2 years there, but the California native started to draw attention from a larger program. Legendary baseball coach Rod Dedeaux recruited Seaver to play baseball at the University of Southern California. He was right to bring in Tom, who thrived at USC. Despite his dominance, there was only one big league team that scouted Seaver the following year, that being the Atlanta Braves. The Bravos took full advantage, drafting him at the final pick in the January secondary draft. This was a big deal to Tom. He didn't just get drafted by an MLB team, but his team of choice. He grew up idolizing many on the Braves, especially Hammer and Hank Aaron. Unfortunately for the young flamethrower, he'd never get to don the tomahawk. Atlanta drafted Seaver in January and officially signed him the following month, while USC's season was already in progress. Because of this, Commissioner William Eckert voided Seaver's contract with the Braves, and gave other big league teams the opportunity to match the Braves' offer of $51,500. If they could match, they'd be entered into a lottery for Seaver's services. 3 teams answered the call: the Cleveland Indians, Philadelphia Phillies, and the New York Mets. The team that won the lottery was the one that needed him the most. The losingest team in baseball, the New York Mets, won the lottery and the rights to what would be their future ace. Seaver spent his first year of professional baseball down in Jacksonville with the Mets AAA affiliate. He pitched quite well, posting an ERA just over 3. While down in Jacksonville, Tom married his high school sweetheart, Nancy McIntyre. They'd spend the rest of their lives together, and his protection of her would eventually change the landscape of Mets baseball. But we're not there quite yet. Come 1967, the Mets were 5 years into their existence as a major league team, and had yet to win more than 66 games in a season, or even finish higher than 9th in the National League. Under new general manager Bing Devine, the Lovable Losers underwent a huge 19-player overhaul, one that included calling up Tom Seaver. He debuted on April 13 and wasted no time making himself known as a legit big league pitcher. Seaver shined right off the bat, representing the Mets at the All-Star game in his rookie year. In his first Midsummer Classic, he was called upon for the save in the 15th inning. Outside of walking Carl Yastrzemski, Tom retired the side in order to secure a win for the National League, their 5th in a row. Seaver was able to rewrite the Mets pitching record book in just his rookie year. His 16 wins, 18 complete games, 170 punch-outs, and 2.76 ERA all set new single-season marks for the ball club. Despite his fine mound work, the team finished 61-101, dead last in the National League. Seaver still received some hardware though, becoming the first Met to win NL Rookie of the Year. The team may have finished in last place again, but Tom Seaver gave Mets fans hope. There was no such thing as a sophomore slump for Tom Terrific in 1968. In the height of the second dead ball era, he won 16 games while recording a .220 ERA with over 200 strikeouts. His defense was stellar too, as he only committed 1 error all season. New York still finished towards the bottom of the NL, but improved their record to 73-89. It seemed the pieces were starting to fall into place. 1969 was a mess for the Mets, at least at the beginning. Injuries, slumps, and lack of experience prevented the young ball club from gaining any ground in the standings. It appeared that it would take a miracle for the Metropolitans to become contenders. Tom remained terrific, beginning the season 6-2 while the Mets fought their way to the 500 mark. Seaver was always a motivator, trying to light a fire under his teammates. He knew if they wanted to play for a pennant, they'd have to step it up. They went on an 11-game winning streak into the month of June, with Seaver going 3-0 in that span. Tom Terrific pitched one of the greatest games of his career against the Cubbies on June 9th. With only 4 games separating the 2 teams in the standings, Seaver took the mound at Chase Stadium desperate for a victory. He tossed 8 perfect innings, 24 up, 24 down. After recording the first out in the 9th, Cubs rookie Jimmy Qualls broke up the perfect game with a single. Seaver retired the next 2 batters without a problem, tossing his first of a club record 5 1-hitters. After going 44-17 in August and September, the Mets ran away with the division, winning the NL East for the first time in team history. Tom Seaver was at the forefront of the Mets' surge to division champions. He had a season for the ages, winning an MLB best 25 games while posting a .221 ERA in over 270 innings pitched. Seaver and the Mets reached uncharted waters in 1969, that being the postseason. In the NLCS, New York crossed paths with the Atlanta Braves, the ball club first interested in Tom Terrific. The franchise got the nod for their first ever playoff game, going 7 innings. It wasn't his strongest performance, but the offense came to play, earning Seaver and the Mets a 9-5 victory. They comfortably won the next 2, pulling off the upset to advance to their first Fall Classic. The only thing keeping them from their first title were the 109-win Baltimore Orioles, chock full of stars and future Hall of Famers. Tom Seaver once again got the Game 1 start, but didn't have his best stuff. His ineffectiveness, plus a gem from Mike Cuellar on the other side, resulted in a 4-1 victory for the Birds. The Mets bounced back with wins in Games 2 and 3, largely behind some outstanding pitching from Jerry Koosman and Gary Gentry. Seaver redeemed himself in Game 4, tossing 10 innings of 1-run ball. His courageous effort was validated with a walk-off in the 10th, putting New York 1 win away from winning the ultimate prize. The next day, a miracle. The New York Mets defeated the O's 5-3, winning the series in 5 games and earning their first World Series championship. In only their 8th season, the Mets defied all expectations and rose to glory. Through it all, Tom Seaver stood out as a leader and motivator, on top of putting together the best pitching season the franchise had ever seen. 2 years ago, the Amazons had never won more than 66 games. Now, they were World Series champions. Following the magical season, Seaver was awarded NL Cy Young, becoming the first Met to receive such an honor. He took silver in the NL MVP race, finishing behind Giants slugger Willie McCovey in a tight contest. He also took home Sports Illustrated Sportsman of the Year, awarded to the athlete or team whose performance that year most embodies the spirit of sportsmanship and achievement. Seaver continued to play amazing baseball in 1970, going 18-12 with an NL best 2.82 ERA and 283 strikeouts. 19 of those punchies came on April 22nd against the Padres, tying the then National League record set by Steve Carlton 1 year prior. He finished the game with 10 strikeouts in a row, a Major League record that has since been tied by 2 modern arms. At only 25 years old, Tom Seaver was stamping his name all over the record books. As a team, the Mets slightly regressed, winning only 83 games and finishing 3rd in the NL East. Even if the team was playing mediocre baseball, they could always count on the franchise to deliver the goods. He was nothing short of dominant in 1971, recording career bests in ERA, strikeouts, and ERA+. Seaver reached a 20-win mark for the second time in his career, 4 wins behind NL chart topper Fergie Jenkins, whom he also lost the NL Cy Young Award to that year. Although he finished second, there was a lot for Tom to be proud of in 71. Unfortunately, tragedy would strike him and the Mets in 1972. Playing with a heavy heart after the passing of manager Gil Hodges, Seaver was still able to put up his typical elite numbers. He led the Metsies with 21 wins and 249 Ks. Through his first 6 Major League seasons, Tom Terrific led all NL pitchers with 116 wins and 1,404 strikeouts. Only Bob Gibson had a better ERA. Sometimes less is more, and the 1973 New York Mets were living proof. Tom Seaver said it felt like no one was clamoring for victories, with everything falling apart around him. Injuries, slumps, people calling for Yogi's firing, it was a disaster, but Tom remained a shining star. While the team started 30-35, Seaver started 7-3. There was a 3-week stretch in late May and early June in which Seaver was responsible for the team's only 4 wins. New York was stuck in last place until late August, slow to get the wheels turning. Behind some famous words of encouragement, the Mets had a September surge for the ages, winning 21 of their final 29 games. On the final day of the season, Seaver won a tight contest over the Cubs, clinching the division for the Mets. On the back of Tom Terrific, the Metropolitans returned to the postseason. It was another big year for the franchise. He led the National League in Ks and all of baseball in ERA. His durability shined as well, as he tied Steve Carlton for the most complete games in the NL. Tom Seaver was forced to carry the load in Game 1 of the NLCS against Cincinnati. The team only recorded 3 hits, one being an RBI double from Tom himself in the second inning. He pitched very well, but just didn't have enough run support to earn the victory. Johnny Bench walked it off in the bottom of the 9th, giving the Big Red Machine an early series lead. A John Matlack complete game shutout in Game 2 and 9 runs on 11 hits in Game 3 put the Mets 1 win away from their second pennant in 4 years. Pete Rose hit a game-winning homer in Game 4, sending the series to a 5th and deciding game. It was a rematch between the team's aces, Tom Seaver and Jack Billingham. The Mets offense got to Billingham early, eventually knocking him out in the 5th inning. Tom, on the other hand, allowed only 2 runs over 8 1/3 innings. Tug McGraw came in to record the final 2 outs and secure the pennant for the Amazons. The crowd of 50,323 stormed the field, creating a mad scene as players scrambled to the locker room. All of this felt very similar to the miracle performed just 4 years prior, but a new opponent emerged for the Fall Classic, that being the Oakland Athletics. The Mets and A's split the first 2 games in Oakton. It was Aces Wild in Game 3, with Seaver and Catfish Hunter both taking the mound. It lived up to the hype, with both future Hall of Famers allowing only 2 runs apiece. Tom's outing especially stood out, as he K'd 12 over 8 innings. The game went to extras, where the A's won in 11 on a single from Bert Campaneris. Although another Tom Seaver gem went to waste, the Metropolitans won the next 2 to go up in the series, and sit just 1 win away from returning to the mountaintop. Back in Cali, Yogi turned to Tom Terrific on 3 days rest to put the finishing touches on the series. That wouldn't happen though. Seaver lacked what he called his good hard stuff, as the A's scored twice early and held on for a 3-1 win. Seaver was credited with the loss. The following day, they again struggled to get runners home, losing the game and the series to Oakland. Little did the Mets know that it would be another decade before they were playoff contenders. New York may have fallen 1 win short of the ultimate prize, but it wasn't all bad for Tom Seaver. He won his second NL Cy Young Award, earning a $172,000 contract to become the highest paid pitcher in baseball at the time. The shoulder and hip pain he accrued during the '73 season carried over into the following year, limiting his production. As he put up lacking numbers out the gate in 1974, the media began to talk. New York Daily News columnist Dick Young wrote that Seaver was an agent of discontent among his teammates. With everything going on in the news at the time, most notably the Watergate scandal, Young made it clear that Seaver was his public enemy number 1. The injuries persisted, causing Tom to post an ERA over 3 for the first time in his career. Diagnosed with a sciatic nerve problem and dislocated pelvic structure, Tom Terrific pitched through the pain, and just barely managed to record 200 strikeouts on the season. Reaching that mark was historic for Seaver, who became the first National League pitcher to fan 207 consecutive seasons. With a rejuvenated arm and new pelvic structure, Seaver bounced back in 1975. He won an NL Best 22 games while striking out 243 batters, also most in the National League, and making him the first pitcher ever with 8 straight seasons of 200 Ks. His consistent strikeout stuff was unprecedented to that point in baseball history. The franchise was back, and celebrated with another NL Cy Young Award, joining the great Sandy Koufax as the only pitchers at that point to win a trifecta of size. Contract negotiations resumed following Seaver's special season, and would create all kinds of drama. Although most of baseball's businessmen were against the free agency era, that's the direction the sport was heading. Seaver wanted to remain a Met, and requested a 3-year, $825,000 contract. Mets chairman M. Donald Grant grew incensed with this request, and threatened to trade Seaver out west for Don Sutton. Rather than risk a PR nightmare, they agreed to renegotiate, eventually settling on an incentive-heavy contract for the 1978 season. Tom had his new deal, but his relationship with Grant would never be the same. 1976 was a disappointing season all around. The Mets finished 3rd place in the NL East, 15 games off the division lead. Tom Seaver went 14-11, receiving very little run support all year. In his 11 losses, the Mets only scored a combined 15 runs. That's less than 2 runs per game on average. Lack of run support aside, his 2.59 ERA was 3rd in the National League, and he earned his 5th NL strikeout crown with a 235K season. It was another impressive year for Tom Terrific, but it would be his last hurrah as a New York Met. That offseason, the front office failed to sign any of the eligible free agents. It was clear they needed to improve their offense, but took no steps to do so. This frustrated Seaver, who badly sought to rise above 3rd place in the division. His contract was no longer the best for a pitcher, as the crosstown Yankees signed Don Gullett to a 6-year, $2 million deal. M. Donald Grant backed up his economic strategies with logic, as expensive free agent contracts would increase ticket prices, alienating thousands of Mets fans. Most writers sided with Seaver, knowing how important he was to the image and success of the ball club. To no surprise, the main holdout in the press was Dick Young. Young labeled Seaver as a troublemaker and insisted that no other team would want him. In the face of drama, Tom Terrific appeared unfazed, going 4-0 in April, including his 5th career one-hitter. Dick Young was relentless though, accusing the Mets ace of poisoning the team. With a trade deadline 2 weeks away, the front office had some decisions to make. Rumors swirled that Tom would be dealt to the Cincinnati Reds, but how could they do that? This was the franchise. No one represented the New York Mets in a more positive light than Tom Seaver, their first star. Following early June victories over Cincy and Houston, Seaver contacted GM Joe McDonald with the intent to halt trade negotiations and work out a deal. It appeared that Tom Terrific would be staying in Queens. A 3-year extension was agreed upon in principle, but it would be too good to be true. On the road in Atlanta, Seaver picked up a copy of the New York Daily News. While reading, he came across a column from Dick Young, in which he mentioned Tom's wife, Nancy, and accused him of jealousy towards former teammate Nolan Ryan and his contract in Anaheim. The mention of his wife enraged Tom and would be the final straw. At that point, he demanded a trade, going back on everything he'd discussed with McDonald. Having no leverage, McDonald pulled the trigger on a deal he'd instantly regret.
Gentlemen, the Reds are announcing we have obtained the contract of Tom Seaver from the New York Mets in exchange for the contracts of Pat Zachary, Doug Flynn, Steve Henderson, and Dan Norman.
Tom Seaver was traded to the Cincinnati Reds for 4 players, all aged 26 or younger. New Yorkers endured the .44 caliber killer, a blackout followed by looting and riots, the city on the brink of bankruptcy. But the night of June 15, 1977 really pushed them to their limit. It would be remembered in infamy as the Midnight Massacre. Following an emotional press conference in the Shea Stadium clubhouse, Tom Seaver packed his bags and joined his new team, marking the end of an era in Queens and the start of something new in the Queen City. He had a great start to his tenure in Cincy, winning 20-plus games for the 5th time. He fell 4 Ks short of a decade with 200 strikeout seasons, but his 9 straight years are still an MLB record. Following the death of Gil Hodges, it had been tough for Seaver to bond with a manager, but he got along extremely well with Sparky Anderson, who thought very highly of the 32-year-old ace. With expectations high for the 1978 Reds, Seaver did his part, winning 16 games with an ERA under 3. His strikeout totals exceeded 200 for the 10th and final time. He was selected to his 4th straight All-Star game, and 11th overall. And after 5 one-hitters with the Mets, he finally got his no-no, tossing 9 hitless innings against the St. Louis Cardinals on June 16. It was a solid year for Tom Seaver, but another year without a trip to the postseason. The organization underwent some big changes heading into 1979, including Sparky Anderson being replaced by John McNamara as Reds manager. Injuries limited Seaver early in the year, but he recovered well, able to win 14 of his last 15 decisions. Following 2 second-place finishes in the NL West, Cincinnati was able to claim the division in their first season under the new regime. Per usual, Tom Terrific got the start in Game 1 of the NLCS and tossed a strong 8-inning outing. Late-game heroics from Willie Stargell led the Pirates to victory in what would be Seaver's final postseason appearance. The Redlegs dropped the next 2 games, plundered by the Pirates in 3. Tom Seaver pitched to a career .277 ERA in the postseason, but only went 3-3, often receiving little run support. Tom Seaver's slow decline began the following year. Now 35 years old, he experienced arm trouble for the first time in his career. He managed to go 10-8, but his numbers were lacking. The team disappointed as well, finishing 3rd and missing the postseason. In the whirlwind that was the 1981 campaign, Tom Terrific shined bright for the last time. Due to a mid-season players' strike, the season was shortened to 108 games and divided into 2 halves. The Reds had the best record in baseball, but finished 2nd in both halves, missing the postseason. Seaver experienced something similar. His 14-2 record was the best in baseball, with his other stats not too shabby either. But out west, Fernando Mania ran wild, causing Seaver to lose the NL Cy Young race. He did hit one milestone in '81 though, becoming only the 5th player in MLB history to record 3,000 strikeouts. As the 1980s progressed, the Big Red Machine continued to rust and fall apart piece by piece. They finished 61-101 in 1982, the worst in the NL and in the 140-plus year history of the franchise. It was also the worst year of Tom Seaver's career, by far. He went 5-13 with an ERA well over 5, posting a negative WAR for the only time in his career. The Reds were eager to part with Seaver, now 38, whose shoulder was becoming a running issue. After a season like that, there weren't many suitors, but there was one team looking to right a wrong. The New York Mets, now under new ownership, had a fresh image as the people's team. With M. Donald Grant retired and Dick Young in journalistic obscurity, the coast was clear for Tom to return to the Big Apple. The city rejoiced as the Mets reacquired the franchise on December 16, 1982. Over 48,000 fans flocked to Shea Stadium on opening day for Tom Terrific's return. He pitched well, tossing 6 shutout innings. It was his 14th opening day start, tying Walter Johnson for the most by a pitcher in MLB history. The arm troubles he experienced the year prior didn't hold him back much in 1983, as he was the Mets' most durable pitcher. He tied the team lead in games started while leading in Ks and innings pitched. But despite Seaver's return, the emergence of Darryl Strawberry, and the acquisition of Keith Hernandez, the Mets couldn't be saved. Tom went 9-14 in the club's 7th consecutive losing season. Although that losing run was about to end, Tom Seaver wouldn't be around to experience it. Resolution from the 1981 players' strike established an annual pool of players that teams could select from as compensation for free agent losses. The Mets were anxious to keep several young prospects and left the 39-year-old Seaver unprotected. His value was highest in Queens, so they figured that no team would take a flyer on a veteran. They kept their future, but lost their franchise yet again. The Chicago White Sox selected Tom Seaver from the player pool, and his second stint with the team he was so synonymous with was over after just 1 season. The Chi Sox were excited to bring in a pitcher with Seaver's experience and build off their 99-win campaign the year prior. Tom recorded his 300th win on August 4th, 1985, crashing Phil Rizzuto Day at Yankee Stadium. In 2 full seasons on the South Side, Seaver put up respectable numbers. As 1986 approached, the 41-year-old could see his time in baseball coming to an end. Following the passing of his mother, Tom wanted to spend more time with his family in Connecticut and requested a trade to one of the Northeast teams. The White Sox obliged, dealing him to Boston in late July. The move reunited Seaver with former manager John McNamara. Led by batting champ Wade Boggs and pitching sensation Roger Clemens, the Red Sox were on pace for their first World Series appearance since 1975. Tom Terrific wouldn't be able to join in on the postseason fun, as he was left off the roster following an injury-riddled 7-13 season. All Seaver could do was watch as his Red Sox blew it in Game 6 and fell in Game 7 to the team that he put on the map. It was the Mets' first title since that miracle 1969 season, in which the franchise led the charge. Tom Seaver returned to the Mets the following year, but retired before he could get into a game. After 2 decades of some of the game's best pitching, Tom Terrific called it quits. His career was full of accomplishments, with some of the finest numbers you'll see. In the present day, Seaver still holds plenty of Mets records, some that may never be broken. For years, Tom was the only Mets player to have their number retired. In 1992, he was inducted into the National Baseball Hall of Fame, receiving 98.8% of votes. This total was the highest ever at the time, and today remains 4th best. His 16 opening day starts are an MLB record for a pitcher. He's one of only 10 pitchers in MLB history with 300 wins and 3,000 strikeouts. His 61 career shutouts are tied for the second most since World War II, only trailing Warren Spahn. When matched up with some of the game's best, he more than held his own. There's no doubt that Tom Seaver left his mark all over the sport of baseball. Even in retirement, Seaver remains synonymous with the New York Mets. The franchise spent 7 years as a Mets broadcaster. He's one of only 2 Hall of Famers who entered as a Met. He threw out the final ceremonial pitch at Shea Stadium and did the same to open Citi Field. The 2013 All-Star Game was dedicated to Tom Terrific, who graced the event with his presence. As his health began to fade in early 2019, Seaver stopped making public appearances, therefore missing the 50th anniversary celebration of the 1969 team he willed to victory. Following this, the Mets made the great decision to change the address of Citi Field to 41 Tom Seaver Way, in honor of their franchise player. About a year and a half following his exit from the public eye, Seaver passed away at age 75. In a year that saw the passing of many baseball legends, the outpouring of grief for Tom's passing might have been the greatest. Less than 2 years later, the Mets unveiled a statue outside Citi Field in his honor. Tom Terrific is a talent that will never be forgotten. With Tom Seaver around, God lived in New York, and he was a Mets fan. When he was on the mound, blind people showed up just to hear him pitch. For fans of the orange and blue, Tom Terrific was everything. Few, if any, have made as big of an impact on a single organization than Tom Seaver did. There's no one more deserving of the franchise moniker. This has been the Baseball Time Machine. Thanks for traveling with us. We here at Baseball Time Machine appreciate you spending time with us. To celebrate our recent journey, crack these codes for a chance to win a mystery artifact. Safe travels!